Bonsoir. Écoutez, on va démarrer. Hein. Il y a encore plein de gens qui vont arriver, mais on sait qu'ils quittent leur bureau quand ils peuvent. Donc, écoutez, bonsoir à tous. Merci d'être là. Je suis très heureux de vous accueillir en tant que responsable de la commission Open Source de Télécom Valley. Vous savez qu'on organise quelques événements tous les ans. Je vois des têtes que je connais. Et les deux sujets qu'on aime bien porter sont d'une part tout ce qui est open source et d'autre part tout ce qui est agilité. Je vais vous expliquer pourquoi en 2 minutes. Je laisserai ensuite la parole à nos amis de QXL Ricardo qui nous ont aidés à organiser cette manifestation. Et puis après, Jurgen Appelo sera à vous pendant 3 heures avec du contenu. Donc, et vous aurez à la suite un cocktail où vous pourrez poser toutes vos questions. Pour que ce ne soit pas trop rébarbatif, quand même, Jurgen a prévu de faire 2 pauses. Donc on va essayer de tenir les timings entre les pauses. Vous aurez 5 minutes, 10 minutes, je ne sais pas, Jurgen vous dira. De façon à ce qu'on puisse s'aérer entre chaque track de 3 quarts d'heure. Voilà. Donc pourquoi agilité et pourquoi open source? Pour un constat très simple qu'on a fait il y a maintenant 6 ou 7 ans quand on a démarré la commission open source, c'est qu'aujourd'hui, il y a à peu près 1 million d'ingénieurs indiens qui sortent de l'école tous les ans. Il y a à peu près 3 millions d'ingénieurs chinois, pour être très clair. Ils ne sont pas franchement mauvais, hein. Ils savent coder, ils savent faire plein de choses. Et si on veut encore exister demain, je pense que le seul moyen, c'est de changer les business models et la façon de faire du business. Et là, l'open source s'y prête bien. Et 2, c'est de changer nos méthodes de travail. Et là, je pense que l'agilité est un sujet qui nous intéresse tous. Voilà. Donc la commission open source a l'habitude d'organiser des manifestations sur Sofia pour que les gens sortent de leurs entreprises, les chercheurs de leurs labos, les étudiants de leurs écoles, et que tout le monde essaye d'apprendre ensemble et surtout de partager, parce qu'au niveau du cocktail, c'est un moment où vous pouvez partager, rencontrer des gens que vous rencontrez sur les mailing lists sans même savoir qu'ils bossent à 200 mètres de chez vous. Et ça, c'est important parce que je pense que tous ensemble sur cette technopole, on est capable de faire des choses intéressantes et de belles choses. Voilà, j'en ai terminé. Je vous avais dit que j'allais être rapide. Je vais maintenant passer la parole à QXL pour 2 minutes et on va rentrer dans le vif du sujet.
Bonsoir à tous. Moi aussi, je vais essayer de faire court parce que c'est pas moi que vous êtes venu voir. Donc, je sais plus ce que je dois dire. Donc voilà, on a organisé avec Télécom Valley, on est partenaire sur cette conférence sur le management agile. Je vais vous présenter le groupe Ricardo, qui est une société qui a été créée en 1998, qui est aujourd'hui présente dans 11 pays, sur 9 plateformes de e-commerce, qui vont des sites de vente aux enchères, des petites annonces, des comparateurs de prix, comparateurs de produits, portail B2C, vraiment tout ce qui tourne autour du e-commerce. On est aujourd'hui sur notre plus gros marché qui est la Suisse. On est le 3e site le plus fréquenté après Google et Facebook. Voilà. Et une présence sur Sofia depuis 13 ans, discrète, mais on est là. Avec la principale équipe de développement de maintenance et de qualité du groupe, 35 personnes ici sur Sofia. Et depuis en fait juillet 2011, on a commencé notre passage à l'agile, notamment les méthodes Scrum. Et déjà, on a ressenti les limites, certaines limites comme des difficultés à mettre en place l'agile dans un environnement qui est command and control, donc ce que Jurgen appelle le management 1.0. Et c'est pour ça qu'on suit avec intérêt la révolution du management 3.0 que présente Jurgen. Et je vais lui laisser la parole. Voilà, merci beaucoup. Merci.
So this was my cue, right? Awesome. All right, bonsoir. And that's about all the French that I still remember. Except for papa fume une baguette. Things like that. All right, so this will be in English. Sorry about that. I'm more familiar with that, feel more comfortable speaking in English. Actually more comfortable even than speaking in Dutch, because I never speak in Dutch either. I realize that I am the only one that is standing between you and the cocktails. So I will try for you not to hate me for the next few hours. Try my best. My talks for tonight are actually 3. 3 talks. I've never done that before, so I hope the 4 bottles of water that I have here will be enough. Perhaps I will need more. The first one is the easiest to get started with. The second one is the most difficult, but also very important. And the last one is the most fun. I think that's the right order to do these 3 talks. And the first one is about agile management. Why management? I am at a lot of conferences. Last year, 20 conferences throughout Europe and other parts of the world. And sometimes I hear when we do agile, when we have self-organizing teams, we do not need managers anymore. Managers are an impediment. They should be listed on the list of impediments. Let's get rid of them. Well, I think, that might be a bit too much. I think there's plenty of stuff that we need to do as managers. And that's what I want to talk about. I have been a manager for about 15 years at various companies. The last one was in Rotterdam, a company called ISM. We made websites, e-commerce websites. I'm sure some of you have heard of the brand Heineken, for example. One of our biggest customers. We made all their websites. And that's where I introduced Scrum in the organization. It was very interesting. I was a total believer in Agile and Scrum. The employees liked it, the teams liked it, top management liked it, most of the customers liked it. Of course, it led to lots of problems that we had to solve, lots of issues, because as some people say, Scrum is like your mother-in-law. She just points at all your problems but doesn't solve any. You have to solve them yourself. And that was true. We had suddenly more problems, according to some people in our organization. We now have many more problems. And I said, no, you just noticed them earlier. Usually we have them on the day of the deadline, all these problems. Now we have them in the first sprint. Isn't that great? We have more time to fix them. Oh, yeah, oh, that makes sense. So we struggled, of course, and we made some achievements. And because I was a manager, I had to figure out what my role was as a manager, as CIO in that organization. So that's my frame of reference. In this part, I want to talk about why management. And this starts with how did we get to be agile. It started in the 50s. Computer programming, it was then called just simply getting those computers to do what you want them to do, in a bit of an anarchistic way, I would say. And then in the 80s, they said we should have a more disciplined approach because this is getting harder and harder. It is like engineering, like building bridges. So let's call it software engineering. And they actually studied software engineering at the university in Delft. So I learned all the ways to create software with structured programming and formal languages and things like that. And it took a long time to deliver software. And when we finally finished it and delivered it, it was of course not what the customer wanted anymore because they had long changed their mind by then. So the middle road actually is called Agile. And I think that's interesting, because very few people realize that Agile is actually sort of the consensus between the two. It is not anarchy, and it's also not bureaucracy. It is in between. And that is, I think, fascinating, because sometimes the anarchists, they think Scrum and Agile is, oh my God, lots of bureaucracy and new meetings that we have every day and at the beginning of a sprint and the end. And they think it's too much structure. While the ones over here in bureaucratic organizations think that Scrum is anarchistic. What? You do not have requirement studies anymore? You do not have architectural designs and things like that? But actually it's in the middle. I think that's a good perspective. So I will not bore you with the details of the Agile Manifesto. I'm sure some of you, or most of you, are familiar with it. This document that they came up with 10 years ago. But I want to point out the first and the fourth of these values: individuals and interactions over processes and tools, and responding to change over following a plan. Remember those two. I think those are the two most important ones of these four values. understanding that you're working with human beings in an organization, and also being able to respond to changing environments. They are key. You remember those ones. We'll get back to it. Now, I will not tell you what all the Agile practices and methods are. I'm going to assume that most of you are sort of familiar with it. Deliver iteratively and design and test at the same time as you are actually creating the code, things like that. Let's focus on what Agile brings and what the problems are. What Agile brings, according to this survey, is many different benefits. Some say that it helps them to manage their changing priorities. That's actually the number one reason that people say is for them the reason to be Agile and to adopt Scrum or any other method. Being able to change priorities. Also, improved project visibility. So being able to see what the real status is, instead of having things 80% done for a year or longer. No, real project visibility. For some it is increased productivity. For others it is a better team morale. I had somebody point out to me a few weeks ago that this was for them the reason that they introduced Scrum, because they heard that other teams were happier when they did Scrum. They had more fun doing their work. Makes sense. I think some top managers love the fifth reason, faster time to market. Why not? Beat the competitors, be the first to launch products. Makes sense. So you see there are different reasons, different reasons for being Agile. But, and this is I think the most important slide, the reason why I wrote a book and why I do courses nowadays and focus on the topic of management. Because these are the barriers to further Agile adoption. This is reported by people who actually do all that Agile stuff around the world. And they reported what is holding them back, what they're struggling with. The number one reason for Agile failure is organizational culture. The organizational culture doesn't fit with what Agile demands of organizations. It is orthogonal, as some would say, to the prevailing management culture and business culture. But also not having the right people with the right skills. People don't really want to change, they resist change. Management not supporting the teams. I've heard of some managers who think that Scrum is something that software developers do in their caves. They don't realize that they actually have to support them and change their own behaviors. So, and then there are a few others, the size of projects, complexity, and things like that. I think the first four are all management responsibilities. They're all responsibilities for managers. The organizational change is an emergent result of how a business is managed. And having the right people with the right skills, well, obviously this is something that managers concern themselves with. And change management and supporting teams, all management stuff. So, management screws up. That is the conclusion that I have drawn from these results. Interestingly enough, nowadays in 77% of the cases, managers are the ones introducing Scrum or other Agile methods, Kanban or whatever it is that they fancy nowadays. Isn't that interesting? 3/4 of the time managers introduce Agile, like I did, because I was a manager, and in most of the cases they subsequently screw up. Things fail. So that is, I think, an important lesson. We have to do something about that. I found this quote in a book by Peter Drucker. He is one of my favorite management gurus. And he said, management is about human beings. Its task is to enable people to have joint performance and to make the strengths effective. And this is why management is the critical determining factor. So he already said decades ago, because this was, I think, in the 70s or 80s or something. He said decades ago that management of organizations is crucial. If you do not do it right, then things will fail. And by the way, it is about human beings, he said. Not about the processes, tools, or whatever. No, about working with human beings and make them enable them to have great performance. Note, by the way, that he said management is the critical factor, not managers. There's a subtle difference there. I compare it often with testing. We always need testing in our software products. We may not need testers in every project. Maybe other people can do the testing, but the testing is evident. We need it. Of course, as soon as things get bigger, usually people specialize, and you will have separate testers who specialize in testing. And you will have people specializing in management. Makes sense, no problem. But it is crucial to make things work. So I wrote this book, Management 3.0, and I came up with this strange-looking management model that was sort of my reaction against the many management models consisting of squares and circles and rectangles and all that boring pictures. I thought, let's recognize that people around the world see management as a monster. People see management as a monster. Let's just accept that fact. But this is Marty, the friendly management monster. So Marty, the management monster, has 6 eyes on the organization, and we're going to review what they are. It starts with the energized people. Make sure that people are active and motivated and that they have fun doing their jobs, because in the end it is about human beings. We're working with human beings. And we have to realize that. As an example, after I had introduced Scrum in the organization and I had formed people into teams, two team leaders, because at that time we were still working with team leaders, they came to me and they asked me, Jurgen, can we move Peter from team A to team B? Because there's a great new project starting on team B and we need him for his special skills. He is an expert at whatever. And there's a new project that's going to start in team B. We need him for his skills. I said, ask him. And they were a bit surprised. They had thought either yes or no. So they went to Peter and asked him if he wanted to work on team B, and he said, no. I want to stay on team A. Okay, so they came back to me. They said, Peter doesn't want to. What do we do now? And I said, I have no idea. It's your problem. So they fixed it by asking Peter to act as a sort of a consultant to Team B. So he could stay on his own team, do his own projects, but every now and then he joined the meetings with the other team, he gave them advice, he did some pair programming, everyone was happy, and after a few weeks they didn't need him anymore. Simple solution that they could come up with themselves. And I'm quite sure that Peter was happy to be able to say no to management. I don't want to be bossed around and moved around as if I'm a part of a machine. Thank you very much. I am a human being. I have my friends on the other team. So this made everyone happy. I'm quite proud of the fact that after I took charge of the software development part in our organization, our turnover dropped to 0 for 2 years straight. Nobody left. Nobody left the organization when I introduced Scrum, because indeed it made people happier. They had fun. And then there was an economic downturn in 2008, and yes, then we had other problems, I'm afraid, that even Scrum could not deal with. Like customers not paying any money anymore, because nobody had any money. That was something else. So I think that's an example of energizing people. Here's an example, something that of a simple exercise that I do in my courses. I call it moving motivators. These are 10 motivator cards, as I call them, with intrinsic motivators depicted on them. With nice little pictures that I created myself. And there are things like status and acceptance and order and freedom and relatedness. These are all basic intrinsic desires. I will get back to that later. But the point that I'm trying to make here is, if you simply ask people, what is motivating you? What is motivating you? Then people cannot answer that question. That is a very, very hard question to answer. It is too abstract. But if you throw some cards on the table with pictures on them, and they have terms that people can relate to, they move them around and they put them in order, like, oh, freedom is most important for me. Oh, I don't care about acceptance and things like that. And they move them around. Then it makes much more sense. And this is what I do on my course, and it is a very popular exercise. Actually, people have started using it on their own teams to get to know how they differ from each other, because there's diversity on the team that is then revealed in such an exercise, and it's a lot of fun. That's also very important. Another thing that you could do, I'm just giving you a few examples here of motivating team members. I have heard of teams measuring their happiness index. This is actually promoted by Jeff, either Jeff Sutherland or Ken Schwaber. I don't remember. I think Jeff, one of the two who came up with Scrum, and also used by some companies, among which Crisp in Sweden, Henrik Nieberg, a famous writer, is leading there, and they measure the happiness of teams. Simply there are tools that do that, but you can also simply use sticky notes on a door or whatever. That doesn't make much of a difference. And the job of management is to make sure that the happiness is always 5 or at least 4. And if it's dropping, then you'll have to do something about it. You have to take action, because apparently there's something going on. Some problems to solve. Makes sense. Another thing. From my own experience. At one point I was talking with my CEO, and I said that everyone in our organization were focusing on their own projects, on their own things, delivering their own projects, and when things were done, the next project started. And we never really understood what was going on elsewhere in the organization. We were never really celebrating things, I said. So I said to my CEO, I said, we should have something like a big bell or something that we could hang on the ceiling, because we had a big open office space with 100 people that could see each other. And I said, if we had a big bell, then we could ring the bell when there was something to celebrate. Well, to my big surprise, a week later he came with a big copper bell, and I said, here's your bell, now do something with it. All right. So I had this fucking huge bell that I brought to the office manager and said, here's my problem, I want this somewhere in the middle of the office. What? But they did it, and it worked, because every now and then, every few weeks or something, somebody rang the bell, and it made a terrible noise throughout the office. Everyone could hear it, and then people stood up and they went to the coffee machine, and then there was the person who rang the bell waiting for everyone to assemble, and then he said simply why he rang the bell. There was something to celebrate. A great new project was paid for by the customer, or delivered successfully on the day of the deadline, or something else. It didn't matter what. Anyone could ring the bell, as long, of course, there should be cookies. There had to be cookies or something to eat. That was a great fun. So celebrate, and that was another example of motivating people. So energize people. That's the first part. Realize that you're working with human beings. I'm just giving you a cross section of the many ideas behind these 6 views. The second one, empower team. Empower the team, or empower teams. This is about realizing that now they're happy, they're motivated, now they have to self-organize. They have to make decisions together. And without bothering management too much, or without management bothering the teams too much. So we have to delegate stuff to the teams. Well, I came up with something like that, like this, the 7 levels of authority. I actually stole the idea from servant leadership, which is 4 levels of delegation, and I expanded it, so now that's, I think, more useful and more consistent. It works like this. For key decision areas, such as, for example, hiring team members, or selecting product features, or discussing salaries, or whatever, anything, you decide as a manager, at what level will I delegate this? At what level will it be? Is it level 1, that is simply telling people what the situation is? At one point I heard from our CEO, we're going to open up an office in the Ukraine. Okay, fine. That's what we heard. That's okay. It was his decision. Level 2, that is a step closer to the team. That is how I introduced Scrum, for example. I told everyone, I think Scrum is great. This is what we're going to do. I really want you to believe in it. So I gave a presentation, demos, we did games. I wanted to bring everyone along, but they couldn't choose. They could not say, no, thank you, Jurgen. I really like that chaos that we were in so far. No, that was not an option. We did Scrum. That was the law. But at least I did my best to involve them. Level 3, that is even a step further. Now I will ask them first, what do you think? Before I make a decision, what is your opinion here? So, for example, over time I learned to hire team members this way. First I told the team, why don't you have the first conversation with those job candidates? And let me know which ones you like best. Out of the 10, I want 2 or 3 good ones. So they talked with them and they gave me the last 3, and then I did the final decision. So it was still my decision, but at least I had their commitment there, and I used their input. Level 4, that is agreeing together, consensus, democratic voting, whatever you want to use. Level 5 is where it starts flipping around. So the lower 3 levels are where the team makes the decision. But at level 5, they will consult me. So I will give them my advice. I will tell them that technology framework that you're going to choose, I think that one is the best. But you decide. It's your decision. But I think that one is the best, by the way. But you decide. That one is really, really good. Of course, this will influence them. Maybe they will explicitly choose something else because I was pointing at that one. Then, of course, they will choose something else. But at least I will try to influence their decision. At level 6, I don't even try to influence them anymore. I will simply ask them for feedback afterwards. Sell it to me. So you made these decisions. Try to get my buy-in, that you did your best coming up with a good decision. Last level, 7, is I don't care anymore. They make better decisions than I can. I don't even need to know. I have other stuff on my mind. I fully trust them. So here you see, delegation is a gradual thing. There are shades of gray. And I've noticed that one of the key things that managers in agile organizations struggle with is they don't know how to delegate. They have this assumption that, well, either I make decisions or they make decisions. It's a binary thing, they think. And then this scares them. Oh, I don't have control anymore. That's bullshit. You can do things in a step-by-step fashion. Like I moved at one point from level 2 to level 3 in hiring team members. That was a big step, I thought. It was still my control, but that was just one notch downwards. So this enables managers to delegate in a more safe way. And I nowadays also suggest people that they maybe can turn this into an information radiator. Why don't you have these key decision areas vertically and then the 7 levels horizontally, and you can move sticky notes over the board. And you actually can try to have them flow from the left to the right, because that's this urge that we have with task boards. We want stuff to flow from the left to the right. That's useful. So some teams actually have done this. I have pictures from teams in Romania, for example, that I got a few weeks ago that actually implemented that. All right, third part of the model, align constraints. So now they're self-organizing, they're making decisions, sometimes terribly bad ones, but usually, hopefully, good ones. Now you have to move them in a certain direction. Now you have to make sure that this self-organization is happening according to your goals, because the scientists say that self-organization basically can lead to anything. Terrorism is self-organization. It is not the kind that we want as society, but it is a perfect example of self-organization. So we want to constrain it. We want to steer it in a certain direction. Some examples from my own experience. One time I noticed a Scrum team was picking on one of the team members. They were very, very unkind to that person, and he was not really able to stand up for himself. That's self-organization. Of course, an unwanted example of self-organization, so I had to step in there. It happens in kindergarten, things like that. In schoolyards, same thing. Some people end up at the lowest end of the pecking order. They have to be protected against self-organization. Another one, the opposite way. I had a freelancer. I hired a freelancer who wanted to be full-time employed, and he was quite capable guy, so we hired him and we put him to work on a team. And then what he did was he kept doing things his own way. He injected his own favorite JavaScript libraries into the code base, for example, because those were the libraries he wanted to work with. And then the team said, look, sorry, but we have standards here. We have a number of technologies that we like working with. We discussed these, and these are the rules of the team. No, but this one is better, he said. And then he went his own way. So I fired him. I did. I said, look, you're a great guy. You're very competent, but not as a team player. Maybe let's agree that you're awesome as a freelancer on your own. And he said, yeah, you have a good point. And he was glad to be away because he didn't want to reach consensus with team members all the time. It made him very, very tired. So that's fine. He was self-organizing for himself and not self-organizing at a team level. This can happen. So these are bad examples of self-organization. You also need good examples, how to steer it in the right direction. Well, some suggestions. In my book, I have this exercise called the do-it-yourself team values. Because I noticed in Scrum and extreme programming and other Agile methods, they have these Agile values like commitment and focus and openness and trust and respect. Very, very important values. But when I researched this, it turned out that these are actually virtues of human beings. And there are many, many, many more. I created a list of 50 virtues, and that was even a subset of everything that I could find. So to experiment with this, I did an exercise with my last team where we said, let's define the values ourselves. Let's ignore those standard values of Scrum, but let's look at this list and do some dot voting and decide which ones are most important for us in our context, for our specific project that we're doing right now. So we had a lot of fun and dot voting, and we discussed and disagreed and agreed, and finally we had a list of, 5 or 6 values that were important to us. I don't even know if we looked at them anymore afterwards. It was somewhere on our task board, but it helped us form as a team. We discussed them. We realized that some things were important for us. We didn't need respect and trust because there was plenty of respect and trust among us. But maybe we needed a bit more self-discipline or something, or more excellence. We were struggling with excellence. So focus on those and not the ones that already come natural to you. Another example, we had our own name, we had our own logo, we had our own website. We had everything that enabled us to form as a team, to have a team identity. And this is very important because if you have an identity as a team, then you can also have peer pressure. And peer pressure is able to steer teams in the right direction. We do things together. Instead of as 7 individuals, we are one team. But it can be very hard to actually achieve that feeling of being one team. So as managers and leaders, we can also stimulate teams to have that team feeling, a team identity. I pushed for it when we introduced a new intranet in our organization. I gave all the teams their own pages, and I said, look, this is your page. It is blank right now. Make sure there's something on it. What is your name going to be? What is your mascot? Like one team, for example, came up with the A-Team. They were the A-Team after the 80s series with B.A. Baracus and all pictures of them solving all kinds of problems. They were the A-Team. Awesome. That really helped them. Another example that I have is using goal setting. Goal setting with stories and pictures and video. This is a picture of a goal that we created as the Agile Lean Europe network. I will tell you later about it. But we use Lego there and metaphors. It was much more useful than writing boring mission statements. It was fun doing this. And another example that I have just recently was my meeting with Mr. Jiang. in China. Mr. Zhang wrote the Chinese foreword for the Chinese translation of my book. And it turns out, and I didn't know that he is quite a celebrity in China. Because 28 years ago, he saved a very small company from bankruptcy. And the company was called Haier. And Haier is now the biggest producer of white good products in the world. That's washing machines and refrigerators and air conditioning, things like that. They're the biggest in the world. He did that. The company was nearly bankrupt. And why? Because they created products of terrible quality back then. And he was sent to that company to try and save it, and he noticed that basically it was crap what they did. So together with a few other people, he collected all the products that were almost finished or finished and that were not working. And he collected them, and he had a sledgehammer, and he told the people to destroy those products. And they said, but we had spent a lot of time creating all this. And he said, but they don't work. We're not going to ship things to customers that don't work. So break them apart. And this is what they actually did. He somehow motivated them to use a sledgehammer and destroy all those faulty products. It is a very famous story in China. The employees were still talking about it. Different people could tell me, and even when I went to Shanghai, other part of the country, they knew the story of Mr. Zhang and the sledgehammer at Haier. And I love that story because this is how they made sure that everyone at Haier understands we are here to produce quality products. They are now famous for creating the highest quality refrigerators and air conditioning, etc. in China. Because basically they know if they create something that doesn't work, Mr. Haier will come here with a sledgehammer and he will tell you to break it apart. Awesome story. So that's Mr. Zhang and his sledgehammer. So use some more storytelling, use some more pictures, more visualization, more metaphors in order to steer self-organization in the right direction. Then, part 4, develop competence. We saw the number 2 reason for failed Agile adoptions or Agile obstacles to Agile adoptions is the lack of people with the necessary skills. So we have to do something about that as managers and leaders. What can we do? Well, plenty of stuff. First of all, coaching and mentoring. I admit that I failed here in the past. I have not done my best to make coaching and mentoring available in our organization. And I could have done much more. In some organizations, it is a standard. I've heard from many people that at Toyota, it is standard that everyone has a coach. You have no choice. There is always, for everyone, there is a coach assisting you. But what I find most important is you can hire them externally, but you can also develop them internally, of course. But what I find most important is that managers do not necessarily have to be people's coach. And this is sometimes that you see in traditional literature, traditional management literature, where they say one of the responsibilities of the manager is to coach your subordinates. Just the name itself makes me puke. Subordinates, that's people lower than you. So one of the responsibilities of managers is, I think, to find out who needs coaching and then make sure that coaching is available from an external coach, a Scrum coach, or whatever. Anyone, somewhere, should be coaching your people. And don't do it yourself. You can delegate that. Makes it more scalable, too. Then, the C word, certification. There are big discussions in the Agile world about certificates and training. And for good reasons, because some people wave around with their certified Scrum Master certificate and then say that they are competent Scrum Masters. Well, I have a good friend who is a traffic management expert, and I often compare competence development with managing traffic. It's many different systems going in many different directions, and they're all trying to get on the other side safely, preferably without causing any harm. And you want that system to perform better. That's competence development of everyone. And the certificate, that would be the driver's license. It's a nice metaphor, I think. The driver's license. Well, my friend said the driver's license is the least important contributor to the safety on the roads. Of course, it does play a role. You cannot simply abolish it, but it does play some minor role in the whole system. The problem is when people have their driver's license, when they think that they're competent drivers. Well, everyone knows that the ones who just had their driver's license are the most dangerous people on the streets. The insurance companies know this. The rental car agencies know that. They refuse to rent out cars to people who just had their driver's license. They say, no, drive around for a year or so, and then come back later when you can actually drive. This is a bit the same with certificates in software development, I think, where perhaps the people who just had their Scrum Master certificate are the most dangerous Scrum Masters to hang out with. I'll give you that tip. But at least they're learning, right? At least they're going in the right direction. So just don't believe them when they think that they're competent. No, you just got started. That's what you said, tell them. So, but it's a useful thing that you can do. And I also send my people to courses, so that's something that I did well. Many things I failed at, but that's something that I did well. Then, supervision and control. This is like the traffic police. Checking if people are behaving well. And I don't mean that managers have to walk around and give people a ticket or a fine. That's where the metaphor breaks. But we should feel responsible for walking around and seeing what is happening and make note of it and understand the situation. And I actually did that. I went to stand with teams during their stand-up meetings. Just pick up what was going on. I attended a number of planning meetings and demos with customers, sitting silently in the corner, not saying anything, just watching. Of course, this had an influence. Just like people in the streets are influenced by police cars driving around. They're not getting a ticket, but they will feel that, oh, somebody's paying attention to how we're behaving here. Well, this is exactly what my intention was. And it worked. So different things that you can do. Many more. I will give you a few more examples later in the second and the third talk. So develop competence. Make people available with the necessary skills. Then, grow structure. This is the fifth one. Because when we have these self-organizing teams and they are able to make decisions for themselves, they go in a certain direction, and they are competent so that they're not total idiots on the team, then maybe they have conflicts with each other, because usually the Agile books assume that you're working on one project, one team, one customer. Well, that's easy, relatively. That's pretty easy. That is how Scrum was defined for one project, one customer, one team. What if you have multiple teams? What if you have multiple customers? What if you have many, many, many small projects, as we had? Projects for only 2 people for 3 weeks. How do you do Scrum? Iteratively, if your projects only last for 3 weeks with 2 people. Well, these are the structural issues that people have problems with. I'll give you a number of suggestions in this area. Self-organized team formation. I keep hearing this more and more. I have not practiced with this. We were not that far that we were able to have people organize themselves in teams. This was something the team leaders still decided, but it might have been one of the next steps if I had still been working there. Because delegation is something that you do carefully, step by step. You go further and further without letting things go out of control. But there are Agile coaches who have experimented with it, and I love the story by Bas Vodde and Craig Larman, as they described in their book about scaling Agile. They said about an organization in Singapore, I believe, where they had 40 software developers and 20 testers, and they told that group to self-organize in teams, create teams. So they started self-organizing in teams, and what they came up with was one team of 40 software developers and one team of 20 testers. Awesome. So they said, maybe we'll have to do that again. Maybe we'll have to give you a few more constraints. Constraints from management. So let's see, maybe the team should not be bigger than 7 or 9 or something. Maybe there should be both developers and testers on them. And also maybe the duration of the team should be longer than 1 year, for example, because people cannot really form as a team if the projects are shorter than 1 year. So do that again. And this is how an organization can learn self-organized team formation. There have to be some constraints in place. Some have suggested diversity constraints. I think that's difficult, but it's an interesting one to play around with. How do you guarantee diversity? Because we all know back from school, when children were allowed to self-organize in teams, then the best ones wanted to be with the best, right? And you ended up with one team full of losers. That's what happens. That's what happens in school. Of course, I was on that last team. But the research clearly shows that teams perform best when they consist of both the good ones and the ones that are still learning. Actually, the teams that consist only of the prima donnas, they do not perform that well because they simply fight over every single thing. So diversity is also perhaps a constraint that you have to define in some way or another. Something else that I suggest to people is to have wide job titles. What do I mean? Well, make the job titles as neutral as possible. Like everyone in my part of the organization was software developer. That's it. We had no architects, no database designers, no front-end developers. I didn't care about all that. They were all software developers. Another part of the organization, they did design. And they had creative directors, interaction designers, interactive directors, front-end designers, front-end directors, interaction designers. I have no idea how many job titles there are. More titles than people, I think, at some point in time. It was very, very difficult because they all kept pointing at each other like, no, this is not work for an interaction designer. This is work for a creative director. I had no idea what the difference was. But they kept referring to each other. That's very annoying. And I said, whatever we have to do here, we'll do it together. We're all software developers, and everyone has the same title. And I know companies that go even further than that. I heard one inspiring example of a company where they said, we don't even have titles. We have the title that the customer wants us to be. If the customer wants me to be a project manager, we print a business card with my name on it that says project manager. What the hell? And for another organization, for another customer, I am a team leader. Fine, I'm a team leader. Because that gives them confidence, and sometimes I am named Scrum Master, other times I'm named Project Manager. Fine. Internally, it made no difference. They had blank titles. I love that idea. Then, nearly there, communities of practice. This is the idea that even though people work on different teams, on Scrum teams, they still have to communicate with others who have similar disciplines or work with similar technologies. So you need to have this virtual network of virtual communities of people discussing things, setting standards, for example. I will give you another example of that later on at the end of the evening. Finally, improve everything. This is about continuous improvement and specifically about change management. That is what I have focused on in my course, and also what my last talk will be about. But briefly, I have one suggestion here that many people seem to like. When you're a manager and you have to fix problems, then you will have to take care of impediments. Well, one suggestion that somebody gave me is, they said, our manager has an impediment door. What's that? I said, well, that is a door with sticky notes on it that contains all the impediments. So any team is allowed to put a sticky note on the door of the manager, and he commits to the teams of trying to solve those impediments as soon as possible, from top to bottom. So the most important one should be at the top. Of course, in the end, the manager himself decides, because maybe the top one is not solvable right now. But anyways, that is the preferred order of solving the impediments. And it makes it very visual that you're using an information radiator. Everyone knows which issues or service requests have been sent to the manager because it's on his door. A very colorful door. Lots of impediments, probably. And that works. And I gave this suggestion to a few people, and then they sent me pictures a week later. Look, we have implemented the impediment door. It looks awesome. Lots of sticky notes there. Great. So that's how you can implement an improvement backlog, basically, because that's what it is. So, conclusion, this was a quick romp through Management 3.0 thinking. We saw six views: energize people, empower teams, align constraints, develop competence, grow structure, and improve everything. And all of that is described in this book, Management 3.0. Sometimes people ask me, why 3.0? Good question. The first reason is that I wanted a book that software developers wanted to buy, so it needed to have a version number, otherwise people would not purchase the book. And 3 sounds better than 1. Just like with any Microsoft products, it only starts to work when it's version 3, or all the versions before are crap. So I started with, I thought, let's take version number 3. But the really useful explanation is that I see Management 1.0 as the command and control style of management. That is the bureaucratic, hierarchical form of management, where they see the organization as a machine that they can drive as if it is a car, as a CEO. Let's steer it in the right direction. But organizations are not machines. They are living systems. And Management 2.0, that is all the fads and the fashions that we've seen over the last few decades, like business process re-engineering, total quality management, theory of constraints, whatever. Lots of good ideas. I'm not trying to discredit any of the ideas, but those ideas were applied to the old architecture of organizations as machines, and that doesn't really work well. It's as if you add new features to a crappy backbone of a product, a crappy architecture. So we need another architecture of the organization, another metaphor, and that is what we now work with in complexity science, and my next talk will be about that, seeing organizations as living systems. And then the old ideas can still apply. Sometimes we need to change them a little bit, but they're still very useful. And I call that Management 3.0. Now, last slide, I think, almost. I end my courses with this one. Unfortunately, you cannot learn classroom training. Unfortunately, classroom training and simulations cannot ensure change and mastery. We can only discern what people actually learn when they try to apply in real life what they're being taught. So I keep telling people, you do not learn to be a better manager by sitting on a chair for a whole day or for 3 hours in the night or something like that. That's not how it works. You learn how to be a better manager by experimenting, learning about ideas and then trying them out, as I've been doing. And sure, you might fail 80% of the times, but 20% of the times you succeed, and then you know, then you learn how to be a better manager. So that's always my suggestion for the people who listen to my talks and attend my courses. All right, that was the first part, and I suggest we have a 10-minute break and do questions afterwards. So 10-minute break, and then we'll go on with the next part. So, had this led to a few questions already? Anyone? Somebody wants to relate on what I just talked about?
It's a question of size. How applicable are your ideas to a massive enterprise as opposed to a, call it, smallish software development?
Good question. So how applicable are these ideas to a huge organization compared to a small one? Well, I think a huge organization should consist of many small ones. As an example, Haier, where I was in China, is a company of 80,000 people, but they are organized as 2,000 units that are run as small businesses. And Mr. Zhang, the CEO, tells all those managers, you should be your own CEO. You run your own little business, your own little organization. And of course, they report to him in the end. But they are self-organizing. They can hire their own people. They can even collaborate and compete with each other within that ecosystem that is that big organization. And that's how you can keep things small, and how you can scale. So I think organizations that scale incorrectly as a hierarchy, as a huge bureaucratic hierarchy, have that problem to solve, because then self-organization is indeed in clash with the prevailing organizational culture, as we saw on one of the first slides. So those organizations have issues to resolve, but plenty are experimenting with it. I worked only at except for 1 year, I worked only at very small organizations, and that is much easier to implement such practices. So it's also more easy to implement these practices if your organization consists of 2,000 small businesses instead of one very, very huge one. So yeah, I think good question, and they probably struggle with some of these ideas. Yeah. Other questions?
More or less the same the other way around.
Okay.
If you're a rather small organization with, let's say, multiple products or platforms that you need to create teams around, and you fall under the, let's say, optimal Scrum or Agile side of teams, how can you handle that without like having people part-time on multiple teams?
All right. So you mean a situation where teams have a size of 2 or 3 or something,
More, but, yeah,
maybe more.
Under the 4, 5, 6.
Right. So small.
Only one person for each specialty.
Right. Smallish teams. Well, first of all, I do not agree with the 7 plus or 2 from Scrum. I think it is 5 plus or 2. That's 3 to 7 is I think a better side, because various reports, very scientific reports on research have indicated that 5 seems to be an optimal number and not 7. But that aside, that still leaves you with some projects that have to be done by one person, maybe 2. Yeah, plenty of them. Why not? What we did, we had such an organization. We made bigger teams of about 6, 7 people, and the projects simply flowed through the teams. So the teams did multiple projects at the same time together, and they decided among each other who was doing what. But they still functioned as a team, because for us it was very important that people learned how to work as a team, that they could take over from each other if somebody was sick. And that also meant that a person who was working for 2 or 3 weeks on a project on his own, when he was sick, the work was taken over by some of his buddies on the same team, because it had to go on. It was a responsibility of the team to have that stuff done. And they did stand-ups together, and yes, they were struggling with multiple product owners sometimes, but we had the product owners fight with each other over priorities and keep that out of the team. And that seemed to work. But for me, it was crucial to have team duration longer than 1 year, because if you switch people from team to team every few months, that makes no sense, because then they cannot go through that whole norming, forming, storming, whatever model it is that they call, and end up with great teamwork. That takes a while. All right. Other question? Yeah.
I have a question about what are the Agile methods ways to measure team performance?
Right.
So-called KPIs.
Yeah.
Actually, I was asked to deliver some KPIs.
Right. So your question is, how do you measure team performance? I don't know what performance is. What does it mean? Nobody can tell me what is performance. How do you define it? Is it the amount of functionality? Is it happy customers? Is it money earned with the product? Is it people not leaving the organization for 2 years, a turnover of 0? That was a great performance for me, I think, that I achieved. So there are many different ways in which many different things that you can measure. And what I indicate, and I don't have the slides here ready, what I indicate to people that they should have some sort of a matrix of different stakeholders. The employee is a stakeholder. because he participates in this social system that we call an organization. The teams have perhaps their own team goals. Then the organization can have an organizational goal. The customer is a stakeholder. Suppliers can be stakeholders. Shareholders are stakeholders. So you have a number of stakeholders, and you have to satisfy all of them at the same time. It's like inviting friends to a party, and everyone should be happy. You do not focus on just one friend and make sure that he has all the drinks available for him, and then leave everyone else sort of, okay, what about us? That's not a fun party. No, it is something social, a social system. Same with organization. So you have to keep all stakeholders happy. But, and this is what I picked up from the experts, measure from the outside in, or measure from the perspective of the stakeholder. Like, for example, and then I'll shut up. The customer is often happy when problems are solved as soon as possible. We call that lead time or cycle time. The time it takes for them, the time it takes for us from the moment they give you a problem to the moment they consider it fixed. That is cycle time. That is just one indication of performance for that stakeholder. But if you optimize that cycle time, maybe somebody else is going to start complaining. Maybe the employees will become unhappy. If you get it shorter, then they will be suffering because you are sub-optimizing for that stakeholder. So what you have to do is figure out who are the stakeholders and also figure out how do I keep my employees happy. Turnover rate of 0% is a great, or at least turnover rate is a great performance indicator, for example. Same for suppliers. Sometimes they have to be kept happy as well. So figure out who stakeholders are, come up with something that they think is important from your organization, and balance those. And that set together, I would call your key KPIs. In the past, they called it a balanced scorecard. But that is a typical 2.0 solution because they applied it to the machine metaphor of the organization, the balanced scorecard. It was a great idea. You have to use multiple metrics, otherwise you're sub-optimizing. But they typically use that image of a CEO flying a plane and having a dashboard full of metrics. Well, this part says something about marketing, and this part says something about product development. And nowadays we say, no, the stakeholders are important. So you still have multiple metrics, but measure from the outside in, not from the inside out. Okay, long answer to a short but good question. Yeah.
As an employee or a line manager, let's say you're really seduced by the concept and so on. But most of the time when you're talking to employees or line manager, they will say, yeah, but my top management is still in phase 1.0. So based on your experience, how did you introduce this concept to those top management layers? And basically, what was really the driver for them to try basically this approach?
Always speak their language. I was promoted to CIO because my CEO literally said, you're the only one I can understand around here. Among the software developers, I was able to speak his language. I had been an entrepreneur before. He was an entrepreneur. He is now our Minister of Finance, by the way, in the Netherlands. He said, "You're the one I can understand." So I was allowed to rise in the ranks, and I always did my best to figure out what is it that he needs: faster time to market, higher productivity, lower number of phone calls of angry customers, because that really pissed him off. If you got a phone call in the evening, some customer complaining, that crap that you have delivered today to our organization, it was horrible. And he didn't know what was going on, of course, but he was taking all the heat. So that was something that I had to fix for him. That was his needs, and I simply had to translate it to Agile and say, well, you get all that if we do Agile. So figure out what the need is of the customer. In this case, the customer was top management, and top managers, they usually don't have much of a problem with it. More often, they are middle managers or specific bureaucratic customers, for example, that don't want to work the Agile way in projects. But I rarely see that top management really has an issue with it. But that might be different for your context, of course. So figure out what they want and speak their language, and then translate it to what you have to offer. And try to make that connection. Yes?
My question is about the list of 50 virtues. I've noticed that, in your opinion, flexibility and credibility are not agile values. Can you explain why?
I
Flexibility.
So there was a list of 50 virtues there, yes, and I had a number of circles on the practices that the books, so Extreme Programming book and the Scrum books pointed out as the core values. Now I do not agree with the books, so perhaps you misunderstand me there. I think all of them could be Agile values, right? You simply have to choose which values are important for you, because I don't have a problem with trust. I trust too many people too often, perhaps sometimes. So I don't have to work on trust. I have to work on other stuff that I'm bad at, right? And this differs from person to person. So I think the standard Scrum values and the standard Extreme Programming values are a bit too simplistic. They're useful models, but don't take them too seriously, because we have 50 or more of them, and I think all of them are Agile. Yep, good. Okay, one more question, then I will go ahead with the next one. Yeah.
I'm interested how can we apply your management, Agile Management 3.0 and leadership concept to the distributed team virtual.
Okay, so the question is, how do I work with distributed teams if I am a manager of those teams? Travel a lot. That's what I did. I traveled up and down to the Ukraine. I sent my team leaders to the Ukraine. I sent the product owners to the Ukraine. We invited the people from Ukraine back to the Netherlands, and everyone every time went for a few weeks at least, 2 weeks or something or more. And we went ice skating, we went to parties, we met parents, blah, 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 all that stuff. Very important. One person even got married. Well, you don't have to go that far. But this was an emergent outcome, as we would say, of the Dutch-Ukrainian interaction. That's key. Travel a lot. FaceTime. Some experts call it. And if you have that, then, well, some say don't do it. Second, don't do it. Third, if you really want to do it, travel a lot. That's the advice. Yeah. Okay, hope that helps. We'll continue. We have plenty of time for more questions.